and we think there's a window in which this business will be
Yes.
We talked about.
Usually that quiets everyone down.
No, I didn't go.
Yeah.
And my husband just talked to them. It seems to have changed.
Harry, I love seeing your pictures of Portugal.
Yes,
So
nice.
there's like.
Okay, yeah. I don't leave it here.
Weather was great.
Food looked good. It was great. People were great.
We went a few years ago.
Yeah, that was the first time.
Went to a lot of those places.
Yeah. There's
Good trip.
2 sets of parents in there.
Kids like it.
Thorough Valley is really beautiful. I wish we spent more time there.
Great wine, like €7 a bottle.
It's great, yeah. And it's not like Napa where it's just crowded. I mean,
But.
And then, of course, during that time, the other kids and family were hanging out and socializing. I see Mark. Oh my gosh. Now every day coming home, the house is just. It's just too much. Yeah.
House just before them. Has had a lot of reconstruction done to it. It was a prefab. And it's turned out so beautifully. I don't know if you guys have pictures coming the first one, the second one. Oh, nice job. Yeah. Price they.
Always interesting.
It was a nice.
The city building, they're so small.
My dad's dog, they
They
house treated it where. The outside was he did his business.
I know you
So,
have,
but
she was a
they-
nice girl.
They have this.
I was gonna tell her the last time she escaped.
You know, there's gonna be more dramatic
That's me.
So that was a challenge.
Works at your house.
Students at discos till 2:30 in the morning. That was a challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I send them to, but after a while, they get run down, they get sick. You know, we're always on the phone. So those are just some of the challenges.
I get some medication while
I think so, you know.
Okay.
Pages are.
How he goes that.
They had to do 2 sketches a day, and they had to journal. So I did that. A lot of it's just learning how
I
to
did get a few calls from just.
So I think they did okay. Some of them I think had expectations. That this thing was gonna be grand and wonderful.
All right, well, welcome everybody. It's 5:30. Let's call this meeting to order. And first thing that we'll have, oh, I'm sorry, let me just state this for the record. This is the April 20th, 2023 meeting of the Harbor Springs Planning Commission. City of Harbor Springs Planning Commission, that is. And it's 5:30 PM local time. Jeff, would you like to take roll for us?
Absolutely. Rick Tarczynski.
Here.
Vanessa Warren.
Here.
Bob Thoma.
Here.
Bill Mulder.
Here.
Barry Leskard.
Here.
Nancy Rondell.
Here.
That's 6. We have a quorum.
Okay. Thanks for coming tonight, everybody. This is a difficult time of year to get enough people together. And thanks to members of the public for coming tonight and folks who've cared to come on electronically. Appreciate it. And first thing on the agenda is our review and approval of minutes, 2 sets of minutes. The first is from the March 16th regular meeting. And have people had a chance to take a look at that?
I move to approve the March 16th meeting minutes.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments, corrections, additions?
Was that Nancy that seconded?
All right, all in favor of approving those minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. All right, let's move on to the minutes of the special meeting from April 6th, 2023. You had a chance to review those? It was a pretty short meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Barry. Any discussion, additions, corrections? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Thank you. All right, those two meeting minutes have been approved. Next thing on the agenda is public comment or correspondence. And this is the part where folks who've cared to come out tonight and join us on some electronic means have a chance to tell us what's on their mind. The only thing here is that it's about things that are not on the agenda for tonight. So it could be anything that we need to know that makes sense, or things that you find would be helpful for us to hear about. And Jeff.
It's something related to something on the agenda, but it's a side topic. We've had some discussion in the past about the situations where someone on the planning commission, city council, or the zoning board of appeals are discussing something that would be on separate agendas. And there's language in the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act and the rules and regulations that we're abiding by at the state level that they can't take action on separate boards regarding the same issue. And we had a question arose due to something on the agenda later of what does that actually mean? And so I posed the question to the city attorney, Jim Raymer, and mainly it was how specific of the same issue does it mean? Would it be if there was a decision that was appealed to another board and it was the exact same discussion, or if it's the same site plan being reviewed but for different purposes? So we asked Jim Raymer. He did look into some case law and decisions, and it's very specific. And the situation where that would arise would be if, the best example would be if something came to the planning commission and the planning commission took action to either approve or not approve, and that decision was appealed to the zoning board of appeals. That's the exact same issue being discussed. And therefore, someone at the planning commission that took action and participated in the discussion there, if they were also on the zoning board of appeals, would have to recuse themselves from that discussion and decision making at the ZBA. And that would go for anything in either direction. That's the only thing I can really think of that would the way that we're structured here in Harbor Springs of the direction. I don't think we really have anything that would be discussed at city council that would be appealed to the ZBA. But that's the situation. So in other situations, like where we have, for instance, here where something went to the ZBA for a variance request, that is not the same request coming to the planning commission for special land use. So that is a different discussion, and therefore someone that serves on more than one board can still participate in discussion. We had a question, and so we clarified that with research, just so that everybody.
That also means that that person cannot recuse himself from that discussion.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless there
There's a
is, of
conflict of
course,
interest.
some other conflict of interest other than that.
And they can vote.
They
Yes.
can discuss and vote.
What if it's something that comes from here to council and it's exactly the same thing?
They wouldn't be necessarily asking for the same.
Well, the short-term rental ordinance is an example of that. I understand, but it doesn't involve the ZBA at all.
I think that would be okay based on Jim's.
That's what it's all,
opinion.
but those are exactly the same.
They're
I think-
exact, but it's not a decision on a property.
Right, one is a
sounded like the key-
recommendation and one is.
The key connection, though, is the ZBA and the planning commission or city council.
Right, right.
It's if something is handled by the ZBA
Those are council.
and goes to, because, yeah,
Which I don't know what it would be, but yeah, okay, all right.
But planning commission to city council is not
Not a
an
problem.
issue.
Okay, good clarification. Thank you for researching that. That's, we've had those. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. All right, any comments from members of the public?
Does it have to relate to the planning commission or can it be a question too? Those two.
Most of these are are comments that we should hear. It's your chance to actually make a comment to us. But if it's, well, why don't we try it? It's
I'm
not
just
good.
curious of something. Has there been an update on the lawsuits that were against the city? Is that all done or?
Which,
nobody-
are you talking about the Carter Williams lawsuit
Yeah, what-
for the IBS boat
I don't
shop?
know the names of them, but I remember.
So there was 3 separate lawsuits for the Irish boat shop plan, and those all have been dismissed.
And then one against, there was a, somebody that worked for the city at
Yeah,
one
that's still
time.
ongoing.
That hasn't been,
No.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, anyone online have any comments that we should hear? Great, we'll have another chance as we get into the different issues. All right, thanks, everybody. Well, the first thing on the agenda is a public hearing and discussion of a special land use for guest quarters at 588 East Main Street.
And as we've discussed, this happened at the previous meeting, Bill, and I think we looked into this again. In order to have a positive action on a special land use request, it requires a 2/3 majority of the full board, which would be 6 people. And with Nancy recusing herself because she's, the one presenting this, or her family is, there are not 6 people available tonight to take action on that. So our option is to, the applicant can either request that we to table it for a future meeting, or they can rescind their request for the board. And I believe we've discussed tabling it for a special meeting date that's been scheduled.
Yep, I thought this could happen. And so I checked the availability of planning commission members, and it looks like we could have 100% attendance for a special meeting on Wednesday, May 3rd at 5:30 p.m. We all still good with that? To hear this one thing?
Yeah.
If that's the wish of the planning commission and works with the applicant, then a motion to table for that date would be appropriate, I believe.
Is that okay with the Rondos?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then that is table. Next thing on the agenda.
I think we should have a motion.
Let's have a
to do that.
motion to,
I move to table the 588 East Main special land use for May 3rd at 5:30.
second, Barry seconded. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Nay. No, okay. Good. Next thing on the agenda is a public hearing for special land use for an accessory building at 15 Woods Drive. Jeff, what do we need to know on that?
Well, this is a request for,
Jeff or Jeff?
this is a request for, drawing a blank here. A special land use
Yeah.
request for guest quarters. Actually, I'm sorry, it's not for guest quarters. Guest quarters is a by right use in that zoning district of R1A. However, it is a 2-story accessory building, and the guest quarters will be on the 2nd floor. So that does require a special land use for having a 2nd story on an accessory building. And we should then have a motion for to open the public hearing for that discussion and to hear any thoughts from.
I move to open up the public hearing.
Motion, is there a second? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. All right, public hearing is open on this project at 15 Woods Drive.
I can speak for it. I'm Jessica Moore. I'm under architect for Jack and Anna Chrysler. Thank you all for your time coming. So there's an existing garage that's in place there, and what we would like to do is add on to the side of the garage that faces into the property. And then add space above for an office, or home office, and a bedroom. The garage is attached to the house, but it's not technically attached because doesn't meet the greater than 50% of the wall rule that you have. So you'll see in the elevations that it does look like an attached structure, and it will function that way, but it doesn't quite meet the technical requirement. So, the shaded area there, yep, where the little hand is, that's the addition to the existing garage. And then we would like to go above that with the bedroom and the office. So, you know, I think it helps us to not eat up all of the backyard by going up instead of trying to go out even further with that addition. And then the gray in the front is an addition as well and a facelift to the old cottage.
Anyone else in the public like to make a comment on this? Anyone online? You'll be looking for your raised hand. Yes, yes,
I have a
ma'am.
question. This is David Young, next door to 14 Prince Drive. The guest quarters then, are they going to be just over the new addition to the garage, or is it going to be over the garage as well?
No, it'd be over the garage as well.
I see. And originally, when Chrysler's came to our architectural review committee, they talked about dropping the garage back another 8 feet into their lot, and you're not doing that now?
So if you look at, so here's the side that you see, which is gonna look a lot like what it does now, only the roof line's a little bit different. They had wanted to go to the left 8 feet, but we're not permitted to do that. So instead, we're gonna go away from you the other direction, 8 feet that way instead.
Okay. They had wanted to go 8 feet towards my house.
Towards, no, not towards your house, but
Back,
back.
yeah, towards, okay.
Right.
But you're not allowed to do that? Why
Right,
is that?
so, well, it's a condo document for your association, so
I
instead
see.
of regular setbacks, you have a permitted buildable area that's for each parcel on the map.
Okay.
And so when we discovered our buildable area, the garage is pretty close to that line on the back, so it made more sense to go south.
All right, anyone else in the room have a comment? Yes,
I have
ma'am.
a further question. Our association has guidelines for any kind of construction or busyness that you may not do it from July 1st till September 1st.
Yes, absolutely.
So that'll
It'll
be,
be a fall start.
okay, fall start. Thank you.
All right, anyone online looking for any comments? All right. Then, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second from Nancy. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. All right, public hearing is closed. Let's go into deliberations. John, do you want to take us through your analysis on that?
Took a look at the application and the drawings, and we compared them to the requirements in section 50.302 for the analysis. And out of all of the factors that we looked at, A through M, it satisfies all of those criteria. So I provided the planning commission with 3 proposed motions. But my recommendation is that it met the letter of the zoning code and satisfied all of the requirements.
Any questions or thoughts from planning commission members? I do have one. There is an association, right? It's a condo there.
Yes.
And so I guess I have a question to our team, like, is that any of our business, or the applicant just needs to make sure that they're square with the
Yeah,
association?
it would be up to the association to enforce any rules and regulations that they have in place.
So the only thing we're looking at is the zoning, and it doesn't meet that.
Correct.
And it's up to them to meet everything else.
Our goal is to make sure that it meets the requirements of the zoning code. And then because it's a special land use, also that it meets our 7 standards set forth for special land use approval.
Okay. All right, what do you think, planning commission members?
it fulfills all the requirements.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's what we need.
I move that the planning commission approve the accessory building at 15 Woods Drive for a second-story addition on the existing garage and an 8x10 two-story addition onto the existing garage, including the expansion of the front and rear porches per the site plan prepared by Jessica A. Moore Architect, dated 3/10/2023.
We have a second on that?
I'll second it.
Nancy seconds that. All right, why don't we call,
Discussion on the motion.
oh, is there just further discussion on the motion now that it's been made? Okay. Nope.
Would you like a roll call? on
Roll
that?
call vote, please, Jeff.
Let's start with Nancy Rondell,
Yes.
Barry Lustgarten,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Bob Sullivan,
Yes.
Vanessa Warren,
Yes.
and Rick Tarczynski.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next thing on the agenda is a site plan review for an accessory building at 467 Glen Drive.
This is a little bit different. Normally, a site plan review for an accessory building would be handled administratively by myself, the zoning administrator. However, the uniqueness here is 467 Glen Drive. They front on the water. And we have language in the zoning code that talks about in certain circumstances, it is acceptable for a property owner to put an accessory building in the front yard. Normally, it's not something that we would normally do. However, we've recognized that in cases where people on the water, they really treat the water side as their front yard and the street side is sort of their rear yard. However, the zoning code doesn't really see things that way. The side of the property that faces the street, that is your front yard. And the property owner is requesting that they locate, they're putting a small shed in between the house and the yard. And I think that Victor has that up on the screen here. We can see the area right there in green is the shed that they would like to put in. And the street is right there. So in situations like that, it does require that that site plan review moves from an administrative approval to the planning commission so that you can focus a little bit and make sure that because they're asking to do something a little unique, you have that ability to review the site plan and make sure it's not going to negatively impact the neighbors. So, and Dan Gorman is here to provide any other thoughts, any other insight he has for the project and what they're asking to do.
Okay, is there anything we should know?
No, it's just, you see, it's a very small building. We actually, it's that meets the grade, we don't need a building permit for it. But as you drive up and down Glen Drive, there's numerous small little accessory buildings. This is probably gonna be the smallest one. That's it.
And one last thing to clarify, that the difference between this and a special land use is where we don't need to look at the 7 standards put forth in special land use, just verifying that it meets the requirements of the zoning code.
All right, should we get some public comment on this? All right, anyone online or in the room care to comment on this project? All right, doesn't sound like it. Members of the, John, do you want to tell us what you think about this? What your analysis said?
I went through it, took a look at the site. It's heavily wooded in the front and on the sides. It's a very small building. I will say that in the new code, this will be rewritten so it doesn't have to go through site plan review. The fact that somebody wants to put up an accessory building that doesn't even require a building permit, but has to go through a site plan review, it should be handled administratively by the zoning administrator. So I didn't see any problem with it. I just have one question, and has nothing to do with the site plan in a way. Maybe Dan can answer. I noticed that the accessory building is on the other side of the existing stream. And I would have thought that the accessory building would have been on the side by the house. So what was the rationale there, just out of curiosity?
I don't know. I get a lot of requests sometimes and
I don't know why.
It must be just the atmosphere to walk over the bridge and see the building over there. Hey, Mark.
On the other side, there's really not that much, there's not an area where you could do that well
Okay,
with that building there. And like Dan said, walk over the bridge is more like
it's just,
walking through the woods and there's a clearing there already.
yeah, that didn't show up on the plan. I was just curious when I saw the stream cut through. But other than that, I don't have any problems with it.
And what's your role with the project?
I'm the builder. I built the house there. Dan drew the house. Now you're putting the accessory building there. Question I have for you, does the accessory building have to match the house? Color wise?
We have language in the code that says that any accessory building should be of similar character and design as the principal building. So whatever can be done to make sure that it,
That's Dan then.
You will.
Yeah.
Doesn't specify color, but it's.
just, I think the key there is if we have a nice colonial style home or whatnot with wood siding and whatnot, that an accessory building that comes in isn't like corrugated metal,
Right.
with that there's similar characteristic for those.
If you've seen the house down there, Dan did a great job drawing it and we built it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it fits that piece of land well.
Little plan, we're just doing horizontal siding, match the house. It shows the little elevations on the site plan.
Good. Any discussion from planning commission members?
Should we approve it with the condition that it has the aesthetics of the current house or?
Like maybe just looking at the design, we could say.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've submitted some documents showing the style and design that they're proposing. So I think if you are approving the site plan, it includes that information.
All right, you want to make a motion on this project? Do we have wording on this? We do.
I move that
Got
the
it.
planning commission approve the site plan for the construction of 192 square foot accessory building in the front yard of 467 Glen Drive per the site plan prepared by Gorman Design dated 3/16/2023.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Second from Barry. Any discussion on the motion? Care to call a roll call vote for us?
Absolutely. Let's start with Bob Thoma,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Barry Lustgarten,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell,
Yes.
Rick Tarczynski,
Yes.
and Vanessa Warren.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did you drop your phone? Or is that somebody else?
That's kind of.
All right, next thing on the agenda is short-term rentals. And we've got a public hearing. First thing regarding the revised wording that City Attorney Jim Raymer has worked up. And to set the stage, let's see if I can set the stage. So we are at the point where we've talked for probably more than a year about short-term rentals and what the right way to manage those would be in the city of Harbor Springs. And a lot of public input, a lot of opinions, a lot of thinking, a lot of different proposals. And we're coalescing around the one that you see here in your package. And at the last meeting, this was presented and there were some few changes and City Attorney Raymer has made those. He's given us a copy here and he's also given us the working document that shows the changes, tracking changes. And so here we are. And I'd say, Jeff, do you want to net out the main points or have, I guess.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. And it is a public hearing, so we should at some point have a motion to open that public hearing.
Let's
for public
set the
discussion.
stage with the details and then let's open. the public
Sure.
hearing.
Primarily, we have two documents. There's the ordinance 437, which kind of provides the core of this. And then we have another document, which is the rules and regulations. And I believe there are 2 copies of that. We had a redlined version showing some of the changes to that were proposed. Primarily what we're changing and adding here is recognizing the limit of 61 short-term rentals in the single-family zoning districts. And then creating ways to work with that limit, creating the waiting list for people that want to get on that. We currently have 61 short-term rental licenses issued. And so it's creating that way to run this throughout the future. That waiting list idea is what we're currently using for boat slips, things like that. We've discussed that at previous meetings. This is kind of setting out how that will actually run, what the rules and regulations are, so that any applicant, somebody looking to do a short-term rental can look at this language and know what the process is. Also then outlining for staff what we will do each year in monitoring and maintaining that list for applicants and anybody looking to get on that. And I know we did have a couple of questions about some of the language in here. As an example, on the ordinance 437, in that first section 79A 103, licensure and requirements. One of the topics that we discussed was making sure that the license was issued for a person, an individual, as opposed to some organization or something. That was a key thing that we wanted to discuss. And the language that was of question was, let me find it here, was regarding demonstrating effective control. And the sentence is, such natural person must be an owner of the property or the majority owner of an entity owning the short-term rental property, or shall have effective control of the entity as established to the satisfaction of the city clerk. And the question was, well, what would we do to demonstrate what effective control means? And I think the best thing I can do is provide an example. Let's say that the property is owned by the Grimm Family Trust, and Jeff Grimm is then applying for a short-term rental license or to be the applicant to be put on the waiting list. We would request a copy of the trust that would show then that Jeff Grimm has effective control of the property and isn't some other side future beneficiary or just some type of future successor trustee, that I have effective control of the property at this time, just to verify that or things like that, because we do have a number of properties in the city of Harbor Springs that are owned by a trust, or some properties that are owned by LLCs, and really it's family. So that would be what we would do
So,
to
and
demonstrate.
to clarify further, the property can be owned by a trust or an entity, but the applicant has to be a natural person.
Correct.
The licensee has to be a natural person.
And that natural person has to be connected to that property.
Correct. And that's what that language there. I know we had a question about that.
So then something where, say, Grant Management manages a lot of them, they'll no longer be able to be the applicant. It would have to be the owner of the property who actually applies for the license.
They would not be a licensee.
They would not be the licensee. I think on our current license, the way it's laid out is we list the property owner.
Mhm.
We have 3 things there, owner, applicant. I think we could still have the applicant would be or the owner would be an individual. I think the Graham Management could still submit the application on their behalf, but we would have to specify that if the property is in such and such a trust, that we're actually issuing the license to an individual person, not the trust itself.
And would that person have to sign the application then?
Yes.
The owner has to sign it
Yep.
somewhere. Yeah, okay.
But a management company could manage the paperwork process and track it and.
So as long as there was an owner's signature.
Yeah,
So we knew
So-
they were aware of
and that
the-
process is very similar to zoning permits when, sometimes the builder pulls out
Right.
a zoning permit application.
Yeah, but you have to have an
The
owner's
owner has to
signature
sign
on
it.
And that's something that we currently have on our short-term rental application at this time. So that's not too much of a change. We're just spelling out in better detail who a licensee
Who the
can
license
be.
actually belongs to.
Correct.
If it's held in the family trust, and it's in the person's name that signs for the license. If that person dies, can the trust still retain the license and put a new member in that slot?
The way this is currently set up, the only person that a license could be transferred to is a spouse. So if a spouse, so let's say that Jeff Grimm and Megan Grimm have a property and we have a short-term rental license and we go through a divorce or something doesn't work out and I'm leaving and I had the short-term rental license, I could transfer that to my wife. But if it's a trust and then Jeff Grimm is the present beneficiary of the trust and I pass away and the ownership of the trust transfers to my son, the license would not transfer to the son.
Even though it's the same trust.
Yeah,
Even though it's the
It's
same
all the
trust.
same except for a name on a piece of paper.
so even,
If that's language that you feel should be adjusted, we can certainly look at adjusting that. The one word of caution would be the more exemptions that you allow for someone to transfer the license from one individual to another, whether it's family or whatever you choose to do, you're creating a longer and longer wait list before that license becomes available to a new individual. So it's whatever you feel comfortable with, but just keep in mind that the more things we put in place of how licenses could change hands, you're delaying when that license could then become available again.
And this is modeled on in a way, on our slips for the slips and moorings, and that only can go to a spouse. So that's how this is modeled on.
what happens though mid-season? The owner passes away. The property's rented for the next 3 months, 4 months. But that license, if there's not a spouse, that license goes away. I know I'm sort of reaching there, but I could see that happen.
The license is good for a year, right?
Well, I guess that's a question, right? So right now, I don't think we have any differentiation between between ownership of a property changing from a parent to a child versus ownership changing because of a sale.
Right.
And right now, my understanding is the way things are worded, if I own a house and I have a short-term rental license, and I was issued that license at the beginning of the year, I believe that if I were to sell my house in June,
Right.
that license
It
would
goes
go
away.
away and the new owner of the property would have
Yeah.
to submit an application and be put on the waiting list
Right.
unless a license was available. And I think currently, the way we have it worded, we have nothing in there special for family. So if I were to pass away and my son were to gain my interest, whether it's through probate or a trust or anything, I think that the license would expire and that son would have to apply for a license and be put on the waiting list for when a license is available.
Is there a flag that comes up that, I mean, we would never know that that process happened?
Realistically, we would have to find that out through some means, whether it's a deed being recorded of the property or whatever other way that we're notified. that the
Realistically, we
ownership is
wouldn't find out until they try to renew the license.
That could be, yeah.
I don't know exactly how to do it. I think there's a big difference between someone choosing to sell their property in June or an owner passing away in June. I mean, I feel like that person, then that season should be able to be finished out. You know, I'm struggling a little bit with, I don't know how you word it in the legal world, catastrophic event or whatever.
We could create.
Yeah.
That's,
We could-
when we
if
get to
that's the-
discussing sections, we
Struggling
could create
with
some
the
language.
idea.
I'm just,
I'm
Yeah.
struggling with the idea that 3 or 4 families that may have rented for periods of this coming season and paid money out front, now suddenly don't have a place to go. And they have to
Right.
fight to get their money back. Instead of just continuing. it
if
on
that's
to
the way
end
the
of
planning,
season.
the planning commission wants to go, you could put an exception that upon death.
It would be
of-
an exception.
Yes,
Yeah, it'd be an
yes.
And
exception.
then know that the licensee, the license only lasts for that.
That
calendar
year.
Yeah.
And then they have to put
Yes,
themselves.
yes. that
We
would-
can certainly add that language, because again, this is a discussion and the end result will be a recommendation to suggest these changes to city council. And we can certainly make that recommendation with the addition of new language to be drafted by Jim Raymer in regards to that topic.
And sale of the property, we don't want to do the same as well.
I don't think sale of the property we should, because that's a choice.
Right.
They can say, I'm gonna sell my property, but I'm not gonna sell it till September, once my rental season's done. But obviously, if somebody dies, it's a little bit different
Or if they want to
situation.
be lethal with their
They can
renters, they
deal with
can.
it. Yeah,
I
then
don't
they
want
would
us
deal
to,
with
I just don't want us to be lethal with them.
Right, right.
For the, for a mooring ball, if someone dies while they're a current holder of a mooring, do they continue on the next year, or their heirs continue on the next year?
If their spouse, I think.
If it's a spouse, right
Only the
now, it says
spouse.
just the spouse.
Yeah, they don't, no one else continues, except for the spouse.
Are the mooring balls that are partnerships listed under one person?
It's, my understanding from talking with Mike Johnson is they don't do shared things. If I have a boat slip or mooring, it's in my name and I need to be the primary owner of the boat. The boat might be owned by more than one people,
Yeah, there's lots of.
more than one person, but
Triple partnerships.
right, but my name, it's the mooring and the boat slip is issued to a person, and that person needs to be the one listed first on the title, or however that works.
Yeah.
So,
The other owners that are secondary owners, they don't have any, their ownership has no bearing on, has no involvement in the actual issuance of the slip or the mooring. So it's that primary owner who it runs with.
Okay,
I'm not sure I agree with that either, but.
all right, so what we have in
Those
front
are
of us,
rules that have been in place,
that
yeah.
would, yeah, I would take up that discussion with the harbor commissions and determine.
so what we have in front of us then is a proposal to modify the rules and the wording and the ordinance in the city code. And the main point is it would limit the number of short-term licenses in their single-family residential districts to 61, and we would establish a waiting list. People would contend for that based on the rules that we set. So let's hold on to our thought about this mid-year deaf problem, and let's, I say let's open up to the public if that's all right with you. Is this require a motion
Yep.
for a public hearing?
If I could have
Do we
a
have a
motion.
motion to open up the public hearing on short-term rentals?
So moved.
Motion by Bob, is there a second?
Second.
Rick will say. Rick, second. All in favor, please say aye.
I,
Opposed, say nay. All right, the public hearing is open. All right, members of the public, do you have any thoughts about this proposal as it stands right now?
Gonna go in person first, then.
Let's go in person first.
Good evening, Margie Marks, 818 Arbor Street. And I want to say thank you for the progress that has been made on this ordinance draft. It's taken a long time to get here. There's a few items though that I think would behoove us to add new language as well. One of the things that concerns me is the revision to section C3A, where we in this ordinance are saying that we give city council authority to establish short-term rental numbers annually, so that they can change that number annually. And my question to that is, based on what? Is it just on a whim? Is it just they decide that they want the number to go up and they vote on that? There's no language there that says to me, full-time resident, how I'm being protected, or even just the number. Where is it going? Where is it going, and why would it change? And part of that, to me, speaks to the lack of addition regarding us trying to bring our number of short-term rentals in a more averaged 5 to 5.5% of what our full-time residency is. And we've spent so much time talking about that, but there's nothing in this ordinance that talks about bringing the number down.
Margie, I think we have an
Certainly.
updated version that says,
Sure.
that put that 61 back into the ordinance, and it's on the screen.
Okay,
So that was in the packet, so we put that back in there.
okay, so that is I did read that, Victor, I understand, so maybe it's my lack of connecting the dots, so I apologize. But I'm not sure that I understand that we're actually looking as a goal to bring that down. I don't see that as a goal, are we, and I thought we were moving towards that. So that's a question to me to discuss. The other is the point of density. How many per block or how many feet apart can short-term rentals be? We talked a lot about that. And there's nothing discussing this either. And the other, it would be the enforcement of the rules. And I know that a lot of this I did put in my letter to you. I'm saying this publicly for those people who haven't read the packet. And that is, we have some really excellent rules in place for obtaining a license and maintaining a license. And we know that there are many, no music? So we know that we have many that are operating out of license. And I respect that we don't have a lot of people power to make this happen, but I do move to solve that, because otherwise why have rules if we're not going to do anything about it? Thank you.
I think, Margie, if you don't know about it, you can't do anything about it. That's the issue. You can't have the police going door to door asking, do you have any short-term rentals, or is there any short-term rentals on this block? That's creepy.
But we have other listings though, that's the thing about it. When you look on Airbnb and VRBO, there are many that are listed that it says right on there. And then if you look and
Yes.
you take that and compare it to the list of licenses and they don't show up on our license list.
If I can add a little bit of response to
Yes,
this. So
yeah.
we have gotten a lot of feedback from members of the community, helping us to identify properties that need follow-up enforcement. We received a very thorough list of properties where a member of the community went through and identified a number of properties that are advertising properties available for short-term rental where the occupancy exceeds the occupancy limit that we issued in the license. And we have started the enforcement process for that. We also have another list that we've gotten from Harmari detailing properties and listings that we need for enforcement, properties that don't have licenses. We have at this time, and I believe we're scheduled to have a meeting and discuss and send out enforcement letters beginning of next week. We have approximately 5 or 6 properties that are advertising short-term rental availability that don't have licenses, but they are in districts where licenses are available. And so we will be reaching out to them to make sure that they are, follow enforcement and get licenses. We also have about 5 or 6 properties that are advertising short-term rental where licenses are not available. And we're looking into then, and we'll be sending out enforcement action early next week to let them know that they are violating the short-term rental regulations. Unfortunately, it's not easy. It's difficult. One, we are a small staff, and sometimes we get bogged down with other projects that we have to do action on. Also, it's very difficult to put together the necessary information to be able to follow through with enforcement. Finding the listings is, an important step in that, and I appreciate that we have people in the community that will help us with that. But we have to document that, and we have to do that in such a way that we can then, if this goes to court, be able to say, as of this date, you were advertising and doing such. So it's difficult, and it is sometimes time consuming to put that together in a way that will work for us, where we can follow through appropriately. But we are making progress on it. Unfortunately, it is slower than we would like.
perhaps there might be some community input. I'm just saying, that maybe some people would like to help you.
Oh, we,
People are already helping you, I know.
yeah, we already have people helping us and it is appreciated because
Yeah,
you know, a great example is there was one property that a community member did send us a link to the listing and the agency that we work with, they did not catch that. Once we pointed it out, they've added it too, and we were able to then help and document that. But so it is helpful.
Sue, do you
Oh, yes, I guess I'm worried that.
introduce
this-
yourself?
Sue Winter, 588 State Street. Yeah, I guess I'm worried that this little town it's a lot to handle. This big thing that's going on and this, I totally understand the staffing issues. Doing what you can, but you know, I don't know. But I do really, I agree with Margie in the density. That is so, you know, most all of the communities are addressing density. Holland, I think the whole town allows 25 total in the whole town. It's much bigger than us. 500 feet apart. That's what and I think they care about the neighbors too. You know, they're concerned, not just people come in, you know, for the people that come in and are making money, they're concerned that they're plunking them down neighborhoods where we have to have the ramifications of them. We're not making any money from it. And it really helps having them spread out. I mean, I just looked at Summit Street. They have short-term rental, not a short-term rental, then short-term rental. That's almost 4 in a row. And there's people around that community that, you know, are retired, some people that work. This is a neighborhood, and that does not make a neighborhood. And I think that isn't addressed. I mean, this isn't just a place where tourists come, people live here too. And this really struck me because I read a review on Airbnb for one of the Ann Street, nice little quiet street. Somebody wrote, we had an amazing stay at this property with a group of 14 for a ski weekend. Great location, has so much room. We definitely stay here again. 14? I mean, how many of you in your local neighborhood could picture what? Would that be 5 or 7 cars pulling up? Pouring out of the cars, bringing in your, every weekend? I mean, does council want this for us? I mean, is this what council envisioned when they put this into play? Did they envision 4 houses in a row, you know, full of cars and boats? I just can't believe they would envision this for us, and we voted for council. And I think they need to protect our neighborhoods and our community a little more. And I counted on Jeff's little list of short-term rentals. It's very well organized, and he put down, or whoever did it, did a great job, but the number of beds available. And if anybody's counted those, there's like 590 some. I'm thinking, let's round it up to 600. Year round, I think. I'm not, I think I'm
It's in the
right.
1200s.
600, that's another half of our population being brought in. And we know that's June, July, and August. I mean, that just seems, and this is in our neighborhoods where we thought we were, you know, in residential, single family. And I don't know if council thought about that.
I don't know how much of that you can actually call the Bible. I mean, I know people in this town that have 6 bedrooms and 12 beds that are year-rounders. And it takes care of their mom, the kids, the grandkids, and what have you. How do you?
Because they're residents, they're neighbors, they live there. We're talking about
But it
houses.
but
They
it
don't-
shows up as 12 beds.
Oh, no, I'm not talking, I'm just talking about Jeff's list of short-term rentals, not other people. No, this is just people that are coming in and out. So I was astounded that there's 600 people in our neighborhood, you know, for Anyway, I think that's about all. I really would like to have some safety, things, I like, the schools, there should be a safe zone around the schools. There are hotels, we have hotels popping up. And I would feel different about my daughter, she walked to school, I don't think I let her walk to school anymore. And I'll end with Home Depot had a survey. 90% of respondents want home to be a place of escape from the outside world. And I wish our council would think about that, because we're not that anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, why don't we go online? Looks like, I'm thinking that's Chase Kushek has his hand raised.
Good evening, council. Thank you very much, Bill and the rest of council. Again, applaud you guys for the work that you've done and continue to do on what's obviously a very passionate and difficult topic. I will reiterate a couple of things that I've said in the past, just especially addressing some of the comments that were just made. I continue to be really disappointed at what I think is overreach in this case for people's preferences. And to me, laws need to be made when people are breaking the law. And short of that, a property owner, regardless of how long they live there or what they decide to do with their house, has the same rights of any other property owner. And just because my neighbor prefers that I behave in a certain way at my house, they don't always get that opportunity. That's why they call it private property. And I think it's a slippery slope that can lead to a lot of really other unintended consequences if this is applied more broadly. And so I'm disappointed and concerned about that. And I oppose limits on short-term rentals for that reason. If there's an issue that the city believes that 14 people is too many in a house, then let's pass a law and no houses can have 14 visitors. Because that's essentially what we're saying, is that a neighbor looks over the fence and says, I really don't like what's going on over there. I want to change it. And we're moving to legislation here to do that. I just think it's wrong. And I think we need to be really careful in legislating for preference. That said, I recognize the need for coming to agreement and compromise on all sides. And the specific comment I'd have on the way that this is written, which again, while I'm opposed to it, I think the council has done a good job of it, is that it should at least be able to pass on to family. I'm a 5th generation resident of Harbor Springs. And if the issue is that we want to limit the number of short-term rentals, which I don't think we should do, allowing it to be passed on to a child, to me, would not add to any short-term rentals. It would just elongate, as Victor accurately said, the wait process for other people. But I think if it's family and you have the unfortunate occurrence of a death and you're a multi-generation family, that should be able to be kept in the family, be it a trust or in the will. So I'd advocate that at least be extended to stay within family. I appreciate, as always, you guys hearing all the sides on this, and thank you.
Thank you very much. What is that, Victor?
That's 3 minutes. It's the timer.
Oh, that's a
That's what
3-minute
that
timer.
means.
Oh, okay. It was a fire alarm.
I know that's.
It was about perfect then, wasn't it? Okay.
We
Any
thank
other,
our anonymous donor for that.
yeah, are there any other comments online? Victor, can you scroll down? You see any other?
I don't see any other hands raised. Usually they go to the top, but this is the opportunity. Well, we do have
Oh, Jennifer, okay. Jennifer, you're up.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you. Jennifer Blancato, 531 West Summit Street. Thank you for some progress being made to narrow down what, of course, has been a very long conversation about the short-term rentals. So first of all, thank you. I do agree with many of the things that Mr. Kush just brought up. One concern for me, as well as what he referenced, is that the license have the capability to stay within a family. Heaven forbid, both my husband and I were to pass away, why would our children not be able to have the short-term rental license, not acquire that? Why would they not be able to acquire that as they would, insurance settlements or the deed to our home or something to that effect? So I would like that to be looked at a little more deeply. And then another question is with the number of 61, I may have missed this, but I thought that there was a moratorium on them until sometime in June, something to that effect. How are we coming up with the number of 61? Is it based on a percentage of our population in the city, in the residential zones? Can someone please clarify that for me? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take a run at that. The number is based on how many current licenses there are in those residential zones. And it's also kind of triangulated with other towns that, we're seeing, and they're in the range of 3 to 5.5% and maybe up to 6%. We'd be about 6% at 61. And there was a lot of concern about current license holders and the fact that, they bought property and intended to use it in a certain way, and they have a license today. And there was concern about taking that away from someone who's made an investment and is running, a successful host operation. Okay, are there any other comments?
Sorry, I muted myself. I apologize. So the 61 is based on really just a rather random number that.
I wouldn't call it random. It's what the number of people who have applied and are operating, a host business today. And so that's what the market has declared is the right number. And it's not far off from what we're seeing other towns do in terms of their limits.
Okay, so ultimately I'm just seeking clarity here. Ultimately, we put a stop on the number of people that are able to get them based on the size of our town and some mathematical equation that based on size of full-time residency, et cetera, and in hopes of that number not going up any higher. Am I correct there?
I think
you need to clarify the 61 are licenses that are in the AR and the R1 district.
Yes.
There are a number of licenses that are already in the central business district. Total of close to 90.
90 total, 90.
A little more, yeah.
A little more
We've
than
we've
that.
had one or two more. But I think just to add to what Bill said, I think he summarized it quite well. But I think the city of Harbor Springs felt that in the residential districts, that number felt somewhat appropriate, but that more would start to shift the scales to something that we didn't want to see in the community. And that was part of why they set the limit at what it was. Some of that was based on looking at other communities and what fit in other communities. But most of it was what seemed to fit in our community here. So we didn't really specifically have one specific formula that we used. We utilized a lot of different ideas in arriving at that number of 61 for the single family residential districts.
Okay, so I'm in the city too, right? I do have a license. So I think what I'm trying to understand is this is more a way to not have any increase. And if it so happens that some fall off, then great for whomever is calling themselves the city. I am part of the city too. I don't see where it's such a problem. So thank you for clarifying what you did. I just thought also that this 61, it was a moratorium until sometime in June, but we're not in June yet.
Yes,
So,
City Council did put the moratorium in place to give Planning Commission time to do what we're doing right now, is to come up with, what the correct limit is, or what the best limit is, and what are the rules around it.
okay. And did I miss, was there a vote through, was the public able to vote on that number, or it was a city council vote?
No, it's for City Council to decide, although we, Planning Commission, have the first step in making a specific recommendation.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate it.
And we have another comment, it looks like, from Mark.
Mark, you are up. Mark, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. You are unmuted.
Man, Mark Finkelstein. Okay.
You stepped out to get a cookie.
Yep. All right, I think we need to move on then and have some discussion here. So I'm sorry, I forgot, was this a public hearing? Okay, so the public hearing is open, so we need a motion to close the public hearing at this point.
So move, close public hearing.
Moves to close the public
Second.
hearing. We have a second from Bob. We do from Bob. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Okay, public hearing is closed. And so let's, my thought is to circle back to some of the comments and suggestions and questions that we heard about. And let's make sure we're in agreement. And first one is a continuation of what we talked about up front about the, what happens to a license upon the death of a license holder. And how do people feel about that at this point, having heard, I think Chase made a comment about it and our other comments. Is that something that we'd like to modify?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Nancy on that. I mean, it's something that is uncontrollable and.
Yeah. It's different from making a choice to sell your rental property.
If I could ask for clarification, are we talking about a situation where there's just a death in the family and it transfers to carry out for the rest of that year? Or are we thinking of that you could pass on a license to a family member for future years?
Well, nobody gets to do that, do they?
Right now, nobody, right, we don't have that language in, so if we're gonna add that language. what would
Nobody
you
gets to continue it over into next year.
Oh, yeah, if you have a current license, you can continue.
Don't they have to inform you and send the money and?
Yes.
So let's clarify this a little bit. So
Yeah,
right
please.
now, it is an annual license.
Yes.
That would not change. But basically, the way that this will be structured is, we looked at it and people said, well, if people want to be able to book out, sometimes a year in advance. So we basically looked at this and said, if you have a license and there haven't been any issues with your license, that you would, to some degree, be guaranteed a license for the next year. That if you apply on time and that everything is, appropriate, that you would be granted a license for the next year. If there were issues, if there were violations and we had, reasons to deny, then there could potentially be a denial of that license. Otherwise, if I've been acting in good faith as a short-term rental, I can continue to do that for future years. The license would go away at whatever point you've created violations and been denied, or you don't request a license for the following year. At that point, the license would be made available for someone else on the waiting list.
My concern, Jeff, is this year, that suddenly the Simpsons get a phone call that says, we know you're scheduled to come and use the house in 2 weeks for 2 weeks, but you can't. Now onto the Simpson, and And I'm trying to, my father has your money, but he's dead, so when the estate is cleared, we'll send you your money back in a year. Is there a way to just continue until the end of the season? So that there are no innocent victims and then start?
And that's what Jeff was asking for.
We can certainly change the wording for that. I just wanted to
Yeah.
clarify. Were we talking about just only solely with a death in the family to carry it through to the end of the year for family? Or did we want to look at, because I know we had some people in the audience online that questioned just the ability to transfer between family members for that current year,
Those
or
are two separate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
I just-
for the end of the
We'll-
season,
carrying it through to
whoever's
the end
in
of the year.
charge,
Okay.
Yeah, I
whether
think
it's- whether it's some estate lawyer or.
If someone passes away mid-season, I think
Yeah.
that season should be able to be finished.
All right, let's take this one step at a time, and let's go around and just get some comments from people about, do you believe that the license ought to be able to continue through the current license year upon the death of the license holder? Barry?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, Rick? Nancy?
Yeah.
Yes, Nancy says
Yeah.
yes. Bob says yes,
Yes.
and I say yes. Okay,
Can I clarify that? Does it matter to whom it passes on to, right? The ownership of the house?
The first would
Should
be
it?
a spouse.
Yeah.
And if two, or then it would continue to the children.
Children, yeah.
Yeah,
But if there's a sale.
gotta be a functional member of the family.
Yep.
Not the ABC rental company.
It would be an inheritance type of situation where it would continue to the end of the year. If the family says, okay, we're gonna sell it in July.
That's the thing. If
Yeah.
there's a death and then they decide to sell it. based
I
on
think
the
if there's a sale of the property,
Then it
outside,
expires.
I'm sorry,
So then it would expire.
and then it
Yes.
would be done,
Yes.
because that would be a choice at that point to sell it.
okay, so
upon
we got
death,
clarification on that. So what we said is we are in favor of, upon death of the license holder, the license would continue for the rest of the calendar year, for the rest of the duration of the original license. All right, now let's take it to the next step and see how we feel about the next level. The next level is, I think what Chase brought up, and the fact that, why shouldn't a license continue on to a family member for the next year? Why shouldn't you retain that ability to renew that license? Anybody have any thoughts on that concept?
It becomes a legacy and people then on the waiting list never really get a chance to possibly have a short-term rental because the ones that are there are just continually perpetuating with the same families over and over.
I also think, and just to add it, it also perhaps not fix some of the concerns about many STRs being located and congregated in an area, but if someone dies and it just can keep on going to family member from generation to generation, then that neighborhood will continue to have all those short-term rentals there. But this is a way to slowly perhaps also change up the locations of where
Might be able
short-term
to help some of the
rentals are.
density issues.
I apologize. I didn't know that we were gonna allow this to roll over. I thought you filled out the paperwork.
We're not, that's just somebody made the comment that they would like that.
Oh, okay. I mean,
Oh, no,
so the
actually,
people,
no,
yeah,
the
the
comment.
people that have licenses this year
They get-
will not automatically have them next
They
year.
will.
They're the
They
first
They have
choice.
first shot.
I'm
at
not
it.
sure.
First shot.
Yeah.
If Jeff Grimm has a short-term rental license this year, and I wish to renew it for next year, unless I've violated in some way, I will get that license again next year.
And one of the reasons we
So the
did
people
that,
in the second row are in the second row
Yeah.
for eternity.
Well, not necessarily for eternity, because, and the part of the reason that most people seem to like that is I want, as Jeff Grimm, as a short-term rental property owner, I want some ability to be able to plan ahead in the future, to be able to book next year so that myself, I have that income and I can look at that, but also people that come to visit Harbor Springs, a lot of times people are, they're filling up a year in advance, and to be able to do that. So if you can't, if December hits and you can't take any bookings for January because you might not have a license next year, that was the difficulty there. So that's one of the reasons why we said, if you have a license and you haven't, violated in any way, you're predisposed, you're probably going to get that license again next year, unless you choose to not renew. So we have that ability to renew. If you don't renew, or if you have certain violations that would prevent you from carrying on a license for the next year, that license would then be available for the next person on the waiting list. So it will, you know, I don't think that the waiting list, well, I think a good example, we had 5 property owners this year that chose to not renew, which then left 5 new licenses available for people. So it's gonna kind of depend on how many people choose to you know, get on the waiting list. We probably now have 5 people that would, when we create the license and create the waiting list, that they're gonna file applications, at least, maybe more. And so if we have a turnover of 5 each year, but there's, you know, 30 people on the list, then it could be, let's say, 5-6 years before there's a license ready for you. I don't know how quickly that's gonna happen. We're making some guesses at this point. As we get through the system, we'll see what that turnover is and how long people end up waiting on that list.
And I think the other reason for it that we discussed is it removes the degree of speculation that people are buying property in the community for a short-term rental. Because if you know that it's going to take you 5 years to get a license, you may not be speculating on property and removing another house from the neighborhood stock. Okay.
All right, so we were talking about the related concept to licenses passing down year to year. And so Barry, I asked you how you feel about if an owner dies, for instance, should the license priority kind of pass to family members for the next year?
I think so, yes.
So,
Yeah, so as far as the spouse or whoever,
Yeah, or
children.
children, whatever. Yeah, Rick, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sort of mixed. But I think it's probably best that it is able to pass down through the family. I don't think you can really monitor it, but you know, the next of kin is going to get it, and if they choose to continue on, then I guess they should be able to. But if there's any lapse, they move to the bottom of the pile.
Nancy, what do you think?
I'm leaning toward spouse and children. I wouldn't say just family, because then you open it up to nieces, nephew. I mean, then it's I'm leaning that way a little, and I think one of the main differences between the moorings, which we're kind of modeling this, is that's a rental. You rent that mooring year to year. You don't have the investment in it that you have in a house. So if your child's going to inherit your home, you know, I guess it makes sense to me that that license should stay.
It's a different situation.
It's a different
If you take your
than the
boat off,
moorings.
if you take your boat off the mooring
Or out of the slip
to
even.
go to Sturgeon Bay.
Yeah, you're,
For 3 days, you tell the harbor master's office.
How's information gonna get
Then
to
they
children and things
rent
like that, as far as
They-
renewals? They're probably not gonna know what the process is and how to renew, so a lot of that probably will lapse.
They'll get a letter, you know, someone will get a letter, the deceased person at their old address.
Let me give you an example. I think there's some confusion between a license and an asset. All right? I have a car. I pass away. My will says I can give it to my daughter, but she's 14. It doesn't mean she can drive it because she doesn't have a license. It's the same thing with, because somebody owns a piece of property that they're currently licensing it for a short-term rental, doesn't necessarily mean the license has to transfer down through the family. The house can transfer to the family, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to let the license transfer.
Agreed.
Yeah, but
No,
if
I
a decision
understand
was
that.
made with the family, it only has one name on there, and that name just happens to pass away, that's kind of a tough thing to.
But
That's
isn't
Treating this
the
like a real
license
problem.
for this, isn't that an
And
asset?
it's not.
It's a piece of paper.
It's a piece of paper, it's a
Yes.
license.
I got a follow-up to Nancy's, and that's a good point, John. So this is where things can get complicated. So let's say a spouse dies and it goes to the spouse.
Right.
it goes to the wife remarries, now that, is that husband now on the applicant's name, and then he brings in kids, and now they have stepkids, so.
Yeah, it
you-
could open up a real-
I know these
yeah.
are like not
No,
likely,
no,
but
no,
they do have.
yeah, no, it could open up a huge, I guess, I understand it's cleaner just to say it can go to the current spouse.
Maybe
They
that's
have
it,
to
yeah.
still be married and it goes,
But that could be 25 years. I mean, that could be a number.
right. I guess
Decades.
I can live with that. I think
I'm just-
I,
Yeah.
you know, I understand both sides and I certainly understand the difference between the two. I do think we should be able to finish the season out. And I guess I can live with it just going to the spouse, just to keep it cleaner, so we're not opening up a lot of extra pathways.
So just to clarify, it sounds like we have a consensus that it can transfer to a family member to finish out the season, but not carry through to the next year?
I don't think we've reached.
Or we haven't gotten that far yet?
Just, Nancy said that's good.
Yeah, and do we, oh, did I ask you?
No, you ended it.
Okay, Bob, how do you?
Well, I think it should roll over to the spouse or whomever for at least that season.
Yep.
And after that, then maybe the person that was doing the licensing is gone. So somebody else needs to do the licensing procedure.
And you'd be okay if that was a child of the deceased?
Yeah, but I'm thinking that they would have to go through the process, not just be automatically given the
So
license.
So they'd have to go back on the wait list?
They have to go back in the pool.
Yeah.
So that is not a priority, so that
Which is,
doesn't.
which is what happens in the marina.
Mhm.
My boat's on a mooring and I die, my son's not gonna get that mooring, it's going back into the pool.
What if it's a spouse? What if it's a spouse, Bob, if you own the boat together, but say Mark and I own the house together, but I'm the applicant on the license, just because one of us signs it. But we own the house jointly. I certainly think the spouse should be able to continue with that license. Right?
For the next year.
Yeah, as
Well-
it should be the same.
The way we currently have it structured, from, if I'm reading Jim Raymer's discussion,
Spouse.
if me and my spouse have a property
Mhm.
and I have a short-term rental license, I can transfer that short-term rental license to my spouse, but my spouse cannot then transfer that license to a future spouse.
Right, it's just the one
It's
spouse
just the
you're currently
one-time
married
thing.
to.
So if I pass away, she can keep it going, or if through a divorce, she wins the short-term rental license in the divorce, then she can do it. But that would be the end of it. She could not then transfer it onto a future spouse.
So it would be the same thing with death.
We could add in language regarding a passing that it could then transfer to the spouse, or it sounds like spouse or children is what.
To complete.
We're
To
narrowing in
complete-
on that.
Yeah.
You could say that the license would continue through upon death, the license continues through that season, as long as the house isn't sold. Because then you don't care, maybe it's a nephew that's gonna take the house for the summer because there's nobody else to take it. You still don't want to have your renters not be able to come.
Yeah, I think the language would be that it, based on a death,
Right.
that the license doesn't expire until the end of the
Until the
year.
end of
That's
the
it.
Unless there's a
Right.
sale of the
Unless
house,
there's a sale.
unless there's a sale of the house. I think that's the cleanest way to do that.
Right.
And then the other thing is though, you can transfer it to a spouse so that you get it renewed
Correct.
every year. But I think it makes sense to end that at spouse. I think it's gonna get too complicated otherwise.
Vanessa, you made the first comment. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I don't think it should be passed on. I think if there's a death, then the pool needs to open so somebody else can have an opportunity for a short-term rental. If it goes to children and children of children and children of children, and then a house can stay as a short-term rental in a neighborhood for 100 years and
So not even for a spouse.
But it does go to spouse.
but yeah, I don't have a problem with spouse, but it's the children.
So that's the way we have it written
Yeah,
now, is it goes to the spouse. It's just the exception on a death.
Because I would like to see the density issue tackled, and that might be a way to do it.
Into a situation at the city marina years ago where people were selling boats and selling the city slip with them. And so the new boat owner paid the previous boat owner for a year's slip or mooring, and then he wrote a check and sent it to you guys. And there were about 6 of them down there.
And that's why-
They've never gone through the system while 300 guys patiently waited.
Yeah.
And that's why they put some new language in
Yes.
to help address that issue. And that's, I think, why they have the language in for boat slips and moorings, that we need to see ownership documents of the boat that you
Yes.
intend to store there and who owns it. And I think insurance maybe, yeah, so they've got some language to try and address that issue.
All right, well, let's try to close this one. I would be in favor of having the license passed to children so to spouse and children for preference for the next year. Just think that makes sense. I don't think, I know there could be some wacky things with children, but I think we could tolerate that. But anyway, that's where I come up. So let's take stock again of where we are on this subpoint and give Jeff the directions that he needs for the city attorney. So Barry, would you favor spouse and children for
that.
subsequent years?
Yep, absolutely.
And Rick?
I think anybody can have it for the end of the year, but I think just to a spouse.
Just a spouse, okay, so. Start as code spouse. Spouse and children, okay, so 1 and 1. Nancy, what's your,
I
where do you
think
come down?
just spouse,
You think just spouse? Okay.
just spouse.
Yep, Bob,
Same.
spouse only,
Spouse only.
spouse only. I was gonna say spouse and children.
It's just gonna be hard to
It's
know
gotta-
that if there's any change within that
It is
year,
gonna be
so
hard.
the license is renewed anyway, so.
Well,
Okay,
I don't think we have to address that issue tonight. This is going to be referred to city council. So city council could,
they could,
discuss that as well and
okay,
have the decision there.
all right, good. So we can let them know we were tied on that. It's a subpoint of a subpoint, but. All right, good.
How's it tied?
It's 4-2.
I thought it was 4-2.
Wait,
Rick, Nancy, Bob, and Vanessa were for just a spouse, and then
Rick?
Chairman just really
Sharing it.
Bill counts as two.
Okay, we weren't tied on it.
We didn't say we were split. We don't have to be
It
tied.
was just a math error.
Yeah, it just wasn't anonymous, it was a.
You don't need a math background, be the planning.
And I guess just a further thought is, we're not locked into this for 10 years, right? If we, this is a resolution, right, that city council will do, and we have the separate then rules.
Yeah.
The rules can be updated, as city council sees fit, if they feel it appropriate. And of course, at a meeting, they would decide that. The resolution requires that ordinance. The ordinance requires that we would do a notice in the paper if we were going to revise the ordinance or make changes to that. But we have the ability to make changes as things go. So we could do this and, throughout the next year, if we see that there are aspects of this that aren't working, we can certainly make some changes and update that based on the needs that we have for the city.
Right.
This wouldn't free up a license though for that until all the licenses are renewed anyway, so really wouldn't make a change as far as the waiting list, correct?
What wouldn't?
So if somebody passed away and it went to the children and we decided that children weren't there, so we took that license, it's not like we're gonna hand it to somebody on the waiting list until it opens up again, correct?
If that's the way you choose to work it,
Okay.
that would be how it would work.
Well, and my guess would be too, that council will get feedback if we don't do something that works for a number of people, be the children issue.
Yeah.
We're gonna get some feedback on that, and we can always revisit that if we're like, okay, we've had 15 people come to us and say, wait, we really want this to be able to pass. to these, to our children, we need to look at it again, you know.
I think the way that Jim set it up was pretty slick. The ordinance basically is very bare bones, and it refers to the rules and regs which are adopted by resolution. So like Jeff was saying, the council can monitor the program. And then with feedback from Jeff based on maybe some things that come up, they can go back and they can modify the rules and regulations without having to go through
Without
another
having to change.
change the ordinance.
Okay, so let's narrow in on a couple of the other ideas that were brought up. Thank you for that discussion. That was helpful. So the big question is the number. You know, should it be 61? Should it be something less? Should it be starting at 61, declining to something less? All the way down to 0. Where do people come down on that at this point?
Well, when we sent the lower number to council, they didn't like it. And we all sort of decided, since we had 61 that one year, that's where we would set the number and keep it there. We're building a waiting list, but I think we need to include that any year that all 61 licenses don't go out, the following year, it will decrease to the number that did go out. So if this year we only get 60 applications, next year the number drops down to 60. The following year, if we only get 59 applications, it'll drop down to 59. Because that way we can drop the number, make more property available for long-term residents, and try to make everybody happy. Because if there's not going to be the demand for it, let's drop it and stop the speculation and get the property out there for people to live in town instead of just people to visit town.
Okay. So it sounded like you're okay with the 61 starting number, but you would like the number.
I'm not okay, but that's where we've been able to negotiate to, and so I'm happy. I'd like to see 5% of housing. And maybe that should be our goal. You know, we'll sundown or attrition, whatever you want to call it, till we get to that number, and then we'll hold it there.
Barry, where do you come down on that number?
I mean, I think 61 is a good starting point. I think that for me, I'd rather see lights on instead of lights off. And I think there's just a lot of lights off. So I don't want it to get much higher for the fact that it does change the dynamic of the city. So, I mean, I think 61 is a good starting point. I think we're gonna have at least 5 people on the waiting list. So I don't see it dropping anytime soon, but I do agree with Rick that if it does drop and we get to a level that we can slowly decline it.
Nancy?
I'm fine with the 61. I think we've gone round and round, and this is a place where there are unhappy people and there are happy people, but nobody is really super unhappy or super happy. So I think that's probably a good spot. I believe the way that it's written is council gets to deal with that number all the time. So I'm really not in favor of automatically dropping. I think, you know, you elect your council, you put them there, and you have to trust them to make the best choice they can for the city as a whole. I'm okay with 61 right now. I think that that's a good spot, and I think we should just do it the way it's written. I like the way that it's been written.
Bob, where do you come?
I'm good with the 61. And if we're gonna reduce the number based on fallouts, then you guys might as well contact people on the waiting list and tell them there is no waiting list. Because if we have 61 now and next year 2 people drop off and we're going to go to 59 and not pull out of the waiting list, why is there a waiting list?
No, we're going to go through the waiting list, but when we come to the point where there isn't a waiting list and we don't put out all 61 licenses, then it'll go down because there's no need for it. There's not a demand.
Does that change? So how do you come out? on
I'm okay with that.
You're okay with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I understand 61. I was hoping for 5%, but right, we didn't get anywhere with it. I do like the way Nancy looks at it, right? We're pretty even with, but we have heard from a lot of people that, disappointed that the number didn't go down lower. So I am in support that if in a given year, there's only so many licenses that go out, that number changes then to lower, but 5% was always the number that I was hoping to get to.
I guess where I come out is, if there isn't demand for 61, that's fine, that's what the market says. But I would slightly favor letting council decide that each year, rather than having a predefined formula. I get the formula and I get the intent, and I'm sick with the intent completely. But I guess I would just leave a little more flexibility to go lower. Well, I guess council can always do anything, but I guess I'd leave it to them. So where does that leave us on consensus? This
Seems like it's split.
split, okay.
Bill,
I have a question.
Yeah.
I can understand you not liking the formula idea, but it just seems to me it's something that's easier for the city to defend if somebody doesn't like it, and not as arbitrary as council saying, we're going to drop it this year and we're going to drop it next year, and people are going to want to know why. And if you've got a formula that says if they don't all lease out, we'll drop down to that number, then you've got something the city can defend.
How does it work though? Because the way it's written now, if I'm reading it right, council can put more in if they choose to. There's no upper stopgap either.
Correct.
So you're saying you need to lower it, but you're not telling them they can't start at a higher
Right, which is
spot.
what we're hearing
I
from
know.
the folks out there.
Yeah.
Well, even if you put some sort of formula into it,
They
the
can
council
change-
can change.
They can change
it
the
as well.
formula
So it's-
They can change this
Yeah.
ordinance when if they want.
They can change the ordinance, like, not as quickly as you can change the rules, but
Right.
ordinance can be changed. So, I mean, it's a good point to have the right rationale,
I do,
to agree on a rationale. I think that's good, but there's always to keep in mind that
that they do have this.
policymakers change. If their ideas change, they could change their formula and do lower or higher, but what we're looking for is right now, what we want for right now, and that's all we can look at for this formula. And this
So it sounds
number.
like, the question is, do we want a predefined formula that would reduce the number if all licenses weren't taken? And if so, should there be a bottom limit to that? Or should it just go lower, lower, lower? My thought is, if we were gonna do that reduction, maybe we would want a bottom limit, because after all the talk and everything, I believe there's a place for short-term rentals in the community. We just have to find the right number. They're beneficial, but they also have costs, and 5% is a pretty good number.
I'd just like to emphasize something that John also said earlier, is there'd still be unlimited license available in the commercial business district,
But then they're at least in the commercial area, businesses in the commercial area, not businesses in residential area. They can have all they want in the commercial district as far
We have
as I'm
some,
concerned.
we have some mix though, because in R2, which is a residential, I mean, we're very much residential. If your purpose with limiting is that you don't want it to negatively impact residential's close residences, neighbors, that's true in R2 also, and it's true in B1 and B2. There are neighbors even in our commercial, except for right downtown. And even there are neighbors. In the condo next door, there are neighbors. So we're kind of getting off track.
Okay, so let's just take stock. Who would be in favor of a defined formula to reduce the number of licenses in those residential areas if all licenses are not taken out? Barry.
I mean, I'm fine with that. I don't think the market is gonna dictate that. I think there will always be a waiting list. So, I mean, I can say that I'd be okay with that, and especially dropping down to a set 5% and not lower than that, I would be okay with that.
Rick?
Yes.
Okay. Nancy, you
No.
don't want a predefined formula?
No,
Let's
I
leave it
don't,
to-
because I think it's an extra regulation that
Okay.
really doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I'm Nancy.
Okay, so 2 and 2?
I struggle with it because we're saying to lower it, but yet they still have the ability to raise it. So what's the point of doing that when they can turn around next year and decide there's gonna be 79?
It's an extra regulation for me.
And to be honest,
And now we're gonna add in more regulations. So that's just why I'm struggling with it.
can I just respond to Vanessa really quick? I think the one thing that we can think about is that even though council can change it, you try to write your ordinances in a way that there's some sort of policy goal, so that's it's defendable. So it's more easily defendable. So if you have a policy, like a goal and a policy, and you have these missed discussions, you can say we're doing this because we have a policy in mind. So that's where the more usefulness would come out of, because we know it can be changed next year, the year after. Next year, council can ban them completely. The next year after that, they can put an unlimited amount on them. We know that. But if we have a policy in there, a goal in there, then it stimulates more conversation and it's also more defendable. So that's why it's a catch-22. You can do it, put more work on us, but
What about the idea of, instead of trying to create a formula or a goal to get to a certain number, maybe just we loosen up the wording a little bit, that, we say, that we're recommending that here's what we recommend, 61 this year, with a goal to work towards getting short-term rentals to be 5% of the housing stock, and just leave it at that. And that way you have a trend. That way, if the housing stock changes, then the end number or goal can change and fluctuate with that. If we get 10 new houses this year, maybe that adds 1 new short-term rental to the pool of availability or something. Just doesn't say that we have to make that change, but a recommendation of that goal that we could work towards. Would that be?
I
a little more
think
fluid,
it's important that
but
we
still-
acknowledge all of these folks that have been coming here for over a year and a half, stating that there's too many.
But we
How do
also
we-
have a fairly
What do we
large
base
number
it
that
on?
says they don't want any limit at all.
But they're making money from it.
But,
We're not.
it's just, we have a group that doesn't want it, and obviously we're well aware of that, but we also have a group that does. And so for me, 61 is a good number because of all the reasons we've talked about. I just think the more rules we put in, the harder it gets to manage it. I think this is a good place to be.
so Bill, we got 2-2, sorry to extend this. You asked Vanessa, where do you land?
So I would actually land to what Jeff said, to just, loosen up the language and state that, it would be great to have a goal of 5%. And that's not putting in a formula, that's not putting in a regulation, that's putting in a goal.
And then council could be presented with that each
Right.
year to say,
Right.
I see the value of going on record to say that our goal is to get to, 5% of housing or, dwelling units in the residential zones. And then council would have that guidance going forward.
But there's no regulation, there's no formula, it's, us reacting to the folks.
Yeah, I like that also. And the fact is that if the market dictates like there's only 39 people, then that's 39
That's
people
the
and we
market.
automatically hit the goal. So it really
Right.
doesn't matter.
Right,
And the market will control a lot of that.
yeah.
Going the other end there. And I know I'm talking out of turn, sorry, but I like where you're going with that, addressing that, but what about the other end? So you're saying they could put on 10 next year. Why not put that kind of language at the other end too, that they're not given the authority to go
You
off the
can't-
deep end with it?
Again, we don't actually tell council what they can do though, that's the thing. But, and,
But if
I
you've
do
got
like
a
the-
5%, if
yeah,
you've got a 5% goal, you've actually taken care of that other end.
Right.
Yeah, so-
I
I
mean,
mean, they're gonna
you've
do
already-
what they're gonna do,
you've
but
already-
maybe if we have that in here, they'll say, you know, this is what they heard, this was their intent.
Go on record with it.
Right.
Yeah, could people live with a statement of a goal to get to 50?
Oh, yeah.
Or get to
5%.
5?
5%.
And clarify 5% of residential or total?
Dwelling units in the residential zones
R1.
R1 zone.
and still no limits on.
Victor, this is going off the reservation, but, okay, so this is the second time that we've done something and sent it to city council. And it changed, it may change, it changed the last time. Is there a reason that we can't have work session with city council? So that there could be 5 people here that they would say, that's never gonna work. Instead of going through the whole process and then them going and at city council meetings say, that's never gonna work, come back to us, start over, can't we streamline this a little bit?
We can do that.
We've been doing this
My
for years.
recommendation would be, since we're about to wrap this one up.
Yeah.
If council decides not to go with this version, then I think that's the path forward.
Okay,
I think it's a really good recommendation.
Yeah.
And we have actually, one of the things we've talked about is more joint meetings between different boards, so we can.
yeah,
streamline some
we're
of these
always
things.
all reporting to each other and then reporting back.
Great. Okay, Jeff, we're gonna take your idea to have a statement in there. about
I
our
think
intent.
we have suitable information that we can
Great.
update this based on discussion and provide a revised version to city council.
And let me just say that, or that goal of 5%, that's usually put in like the preamble of an ordinance. It's usually not like, you know, a language of that's gonna be regulation, but it's the goal with this ordinance. So that's usually where it's put in. So, yeah, just.
Yeah, and obviously Jim will find the appropriate ways to, but I think we have 2 ideas. One was the discussion of transfer of a license upon death, and then the topic of the number and the goal. I think we can certainly update this with Jim's input for a revised version to go to city council. If that's your wish and your desire, I think the appropriate thing would be a motion to make that recommendation.
Unless Bill or the planning commission have more items. that they
Oh,
just-
unless there's more things.
I actually do have another item.
All right.
And, so just to close the loop on another important idea, and that is, what about geographic proximity and density? Are we ready to tackle that at this point? In the city? And let's, you know, do you think we can manage that administratively?
I hate to say, you know, I hate to try and dictate what we do, but certain types of enforcement actions or enforcement things are going to dramatically impact the time it takes to administer short-term rentals. Some things I think are easier to do, some things I think are more difficult. I think that trying to include that, and I'm not trying to say whether we should or shouldn't, but I think that that would have a large financial impact on how much it would cost us in both time and resources to administer and monitor that. And I would almost, to successfully, I guess that's the key. And my one thought would be at some point we hit a level of at some point we hit a level where in order to effectively administer the things that we need to enforce, we would have to look at either extending the amount of time available or hiring additional people to do that work. And so the question is that something that we're going to recommend to city council, that we want to hire an additional person to be able to manage and do this?
Jeff, can
Or-
you expand on why it would take more additional work for, if we talk about density?
I mean, you know, if we're talking about density and proximity, that means that we have to, you know, keep track of that and monitor that. And then we also have to look at what it would take when people are applying and doing that time to look at where all the existing licenses are and have that mapped out and then look at each license individually as they come through and where they would be in proximity. So I think it would add a significant amount of time to the administering of new licenses. And we already spend a significant amount of time on this already with the staff that we have.
Well, there's 4 on a block. How do you decide which 2 are going to get screwed?
No, I don't think.
Well, I think-
I can't do that.
I think what we would have to do at this point in time is we have the licenses. If we wanted to say we're only going to allow that they can't be within 500 feet of each other or 300, whatever that number might be, we would probably have to work on sunsetting some of the ones that don't comply with that. And then moving forward with issuing of new licenses, it would be something that we would monitor and keep track of. And it's certainly something that can be done, and a lot of other communities do that. But I think that when you look at the communities that do that, they are larger communities that have more staff available. And so I guess the question is, what resources does the city want to put forward into administering this? And unfortunately, we do have to look at where we spend.
That's more of a question for council. I
Of
think
course.
this question for planning commission is more of a policy. So and not to say, but I think that's not a question for planning commission, is like how much resources, they don't focus on that. So I think the policy question is, of course, you want to look at enforcement administration, but the amount of money that we could spend in time, that's how council wants to spend the budget. So
John,
just
do you have
not
any
to.
experience with this? Or-
Yeah, well, the cat's out of the bag here because you already got 61 licenses.
Yeah.
And you can't draw circles around them and then like Bob's saying, tell which 2 they can't have a license. But what you can do is you could draw and determine a circle radius, 300 feet around all of your existing licenses. And then determine what neighborhoods you're not going to issue any new licenses to that may be over impacted. I mean, so you don't end up with a neighborhood within 2 blocks that have 5 or 6 short-term rentals. The map would say, these areas already have short-term rentals. There's only a few more areas left outside of those pockets that you could have a short-term rental. That'd be the easiest way to do it if you want to reduce the density. But like Jeff is saying, I mean, how are you going to arbitrarily decide which person you're not going to do a license just because there's 2 or 3 in the neighborhood now? It would have been different starting out if you'd have had an ordinance that had that, then as you issued a license, you could draw a circle and say, no more in this area, but can't do it now.
We've looked at the process that other cities use, and they have, radii drawn, and they have definitions, and is it measured from the center of the property to or is it measured from the nearest edge? Anyway, we probably could do all that. What another complexity I'm thinking about is let's say we put one of these limits in. And then Rick has his short-term rental and it running along fine. Barry applies for a license, the next year, and we have to say to Barry, nope, sorry, you're too close to Rick's place. Barry says, damn. And then if we find out that Rick doesn't apply to renew his license, and then we have already taken somebody off the waiting list, and then we go back to Barry and say, sorry, you could have made it, but so I don't even know how.
Well, I think what we it's do, administrative. can I clarify for how we
Yeah.
do it for like slips, right? You have different sizes and different series for slips and moorings, that if an area comes up available where you're the next on the waiting list and that area is not available, you just stay on the waiting list until there's a residential zone that opens up for you. So just like with the series, like, you wait the 300 series or 200 series, you wait to that. So you stay in your position, you're always next in line until one is available in your neighborhood. It could be a while. But
Okay.
anyway,
All right.
that might.
I think we got a
help.
flavor for it.
There's certainly ways to administer it,
Yeah.
yes.
I think we got a flavor for it. Why don't we go around, just get your take on it. Barry, what are you thinking on it?
I'm really not in favor. I think just administratively for them, I think it would be a nightmare. And then I think that we're already limited to 61. So I think just putting more limits on things. I think for the people that are pro short-term rentals, I think this is just adding to kind of what we're limiting. So I would say I'm not really for it.
Nancy, where do you come out?
I'm not really for it. It's another whole set of regulations.
to enforce and monitor. I don't think we need it. Was that much?
Ditto, more rules, more regulations, more enforcement, more people, more money, no. Okay. So,
I just don't know how we can do it fairly.
Guess where I come out is I definitely appreciate the concept and like the idea and concept. I'm just thinking we're not, that's another layer too many at this point. Like, let's put this in place and leave, maybe when Victor conveys this to council, he could pass along the fact that we did consider a geographic limitation. We're in agreement with the idea, but we think it's just too much right now for administratively. So, and council could
Is
consider.
there a way for us to look at a map and see what's going on besides, keep you 61, well, where are they?
Yeah.
On Summit Street or?
We had a map of last year's,
Uh-huh.
of 2022's licenses, and we did show that at a couple meetings where we outlined where the short-term rentals were. So, and we can certainly do that again with the licenses for this year.
Can you make it a little bigger? I mean, I counted them all, figured out where all of them were, but it was pretty tough to read and really tell where they were. So if you could, that would be great.
So council should receive that as part of the package.
Sure.
Council should see that.
Yeah, that for council.
All right. It sounds like we do not have consensus to include a density or geographic limitation right now.
Let's.
I think it's taking us easier for us to get what we have in place or trying to get in place, and I mean, it's something that could be added, so let's get what we can do, yeah.
Okay. The other thing that we've been carrying is the idea of safety or school zones, and there was also a talk about background checks for renters and
I think Airbnb and VRBO do somewhat of a background, it's a basic background check. It's not gonna get too involved, but there is somewhat of a background check that they vet for whoever's listing or purchasing for that short-term rental.
thoughts on that? Anyone?
Kyle, do you have any thoughts on this? Sorry to do that to
Background
you,
checks for
but
short-term rental.
Be a very difficult thing to do. We don't do background checks on who buys houses.
Yeah. The owner has to do it, not the police.
Well, yeah, even the owner, I mean, somebody puts a bid on a house, normally they don't do a background check.
I think Sue's talking about the host of a short-term rental.
So in Europe, when you rent an Airbnb, everybody has to present their passport that is staying at that house. Everybody has to do that, and there is a background check for everybody who stays at a house in Europe.
I don't think the city wants to get into that.
I had a conversation with Jim Raymer about this a little bit, and I think maybe it's the council meeting, it can be discussed a little more. I don't think that there's any problem with having language in it that states that the short-term rental owner shall not rent to someone that, has certain, issues or whatnot. I think the problem is we don't want to get involved in pre-checks before someone comes and stays, that it's more of a situation of if something happens at that property and that becomes part of the situation, that might be a reason that their license is not renewed for the following year.
yes, thank you.
That's what you.
Right, that more of that line, and maybe I'm, getting some of the conversation wrong, and we can verify that with Jim at city council, but I think the idea was, including something like that is not, we could do something, but it would be more of that way, as opposed to, I think it would be way too cumbersome to try and say, before you have any renters visit your property, you need to submit that list to us so that we can run a background check and say this person.
Yeah,
can or
no,
can't.
the owner would have to
It would
run
be,
it.
it would be
So
something.
let me, from a administrative perspective, or enforcement, let's say someone rents to someone that they have a background that we and first of all, we have to determine what backgrounds that we don't want the owners to, is it, any kind of crime? Is it, misdemeanor? So we have to determine that. The second thing is, if we do find out that they rented to someone of this, how do we go proceed and take that to court? We have to take that person to court, and how do we prove it? There's a lot of steps there. So if that owner has to provide us with a list of everything, okay, great, they provide us a list if they say they have background checks, but how do we verify? Then we have to spend time verifying that.
Well, there's a cost involved. So let's say there's 4 people staying at an Airbnb, minimum of $25 per background check. I mean, that's $100. So it gets to a point where it doesn't make sense to even rent out your property.
I'm not sure we
I think
legally even have a
you're
right.
overthinking it. I think in the licensing procedure that the applicant would sign, you would have something in there that's saying that they're prohibited from, renting out their short-term rental to somebody that's on the, the sex registry?
Offender list.
Okay,
Criminal syndrome.
whatever you call it.
And a sex
and then-
offender can't live within in the school zone,
In
correct?
schools.
Yeah, and the sex
Let's say, but you don't have to check it, but let's say something happened while that person was using the property, then that's when the police would be involved. And then it would be up to, and then like Jeff is saying, then the owner would be the one that gets the violation and maybe has his license suspended because he violated that provision. That gets rid of people doing background checks.
Isn't
it a sex
offender's responsibility to declare that themselves?
Well,
I think it is.
Not on vacation,
Right.
where they live, right?
It's their residence. They can't reside within 1,000 feet of a school.
Okay, so they can vacation and rent. There's no regulation to this.
They can't loiter on school property either. They can drive by school property, but they can't so it could fall within the sex offender registry. I mean, if we get a call that there's a sex offender renting for 3 months on Lake Street between Blackbird and Shea, well, where Shea used to be, they would be in violation.
And then if that's the case, then Jeff can notify the short-term rental owner that they violated their application, their license, and they could have it revoked. Yeah. So it puts the responsibility on the short-term rental owner, not on the city to monitor the background checks.
What happens if we get, John, into a situation where nothing happened at the property, but someone discovers that someone who's renting it is on the sex register? So then we have to take action.
You have to take.
Then we have to take
You have
action.
to
So
take
that's just,
Then you have to take.
how someone would know that, that happened, I don't know. It would,
I wouldn't know either.
but that's the one caveat that, and maybe that'd be so infrequent that it wouldn't be an
Enforcement issue.
issue. But for going beyond a sex registry offense, that would be a lot for us.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't do that either.
So.
We don't even do background checks on city council members and planning commission.
Yeah, we do.
Yes and no. There's no requirement, in our charter lists a requirement for how you can serve on council. So it only has basically 2 requirements. You've been resided here for 2 years. And you're not late on any payments to the city for taxes. So we have, even if we ran a background check on council, it's up to electors to decide whether that's valid or not. For planning commission and all these other ones, we do, but we don't do necessarily an extensive, we don't every time go through for every applicant, the iChat, background list. We can do basic things like Google searches and stuff like that, but we don't necessarily for every single position do that. And we talked about this at one of our RC meetings on making that a more consistent process for people who at least get appointed. But there's a cost to that, obviously, but it's worth the cost, I guess, for if you're going to be entrusted with city business. But to going back to that, I think John's proposal is a reasonable one if the onus is on the owner for registered sex offenders. But we just got to be careful that the onus doesn't become on us, because then what liability do we have if, well, the city knew there was someone registered there and they didn't do anything about it, or the city didn't do their due diligence. So we got to make sure it's clearly on the owner. And then we got to think about, all right, well, if we're going to regulate short-term rentals, why aren't we regulating rentals?
I feel like,
long-term rental
I
units.
feel like
So
we're saying short-term rental people are bad. The chance of them being bad or whatever is much higher. So therefore, we have to do all these extra things because they come and spend 3 days in Harbor Springs. So I'm struggling with a whole lot of it. We don't do it on long-term renters, we don't do it on owners, we don't do it on owners' guests that come to visit. And I just think we need to be cautious of our reach on this. I think, it's not gonna guarantee something bad isn't gonna happen. I'm really struggling with the whole.
there's no track record of things being bad. I'm a short-term rental when I travel, so like. if
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing if someone's had a bad experience, I mean, if a short-term rental person comes and doesn't behave themselves, that's a whole different issue. But we're assuming they're bad. I mean, that's what I keep hearing all the time. And we have 90 short-term rentals in town, and we've had an issue with about 3 or 4 of them. And we're putting all these regulations in place to put those few fires out. So just across the board, I struggle with that a lot. So I think we're really kind of getting into more than we really need to. I'm fine with it. 61 short-term rentals. Let's give it a try for a year or two. Let's see how it works. Let's see where we are. See what the short-term rental industry does. I think the market's going to control itself to a great extent anyway. But
Okay,
that's
well, let's
where I
get
am on it.
consensus on the
Yeah.
sub idea of the sex offender or whatever. Barry, are you in favor of any?
No, I don't think it would be hard to regulate, and it would just, I think it's just not.
Rick?
I have concerns, which is why I brought it up before, because there's short-term rental across the street from the school, and I just have a bad feeling about it. But I can see that economically, it's probably beyond us. And I think, so we're not gonna be able to act proactively, but I think the property owners are responsible for who they rent to. It's in their license. So if anything does bad happen, they're the ones that are responsible, and we can take action at it. So I guess overall, there's nothing we can do. So I think I'm good with it.
Nancy, we heard your.
Yeah, I'm with these guys. I don't wanna.
No
get
additional
involved.
wording.
I don't want to. First of all, I don't believe that all people with records are inherently bad people. I did a massive prison job at Mansfield Prison in Ohio, which is where the Shawshank Redemption was filmed. And of 5,000 inmates, prison officials gleefully would tell people that 90% of the inmates were just dumbasses who did something stupid and got caught. And only 10% of the people in the prison actually deserved to be there, that the other 90% needed a job. They're not bad people. They're just people that screw up. Certainly there's bad people, but I'm not sure how many bad people come to Harbor Springs and pay $5,000 a week for a rental home. I'm not.
So you're not in favor of
No.
any extra wording?
No.
I think it would be too difficult. So I'm not in favor of it.
And I definitely get the concept. And I'm thinking it's a level of detail maybe too far for us at this point. Sure don't want anything to happen, but I don't think we're ready. I think let's send it to council with the few additions that we've made.
But Nancy's right. It could happen with someone who owns a house. It could happen with a long term. I mean,
Phil, can I have one thing?
Yeah.
We refer to these a lot as like hotels, basically. I mean, that's sort of the reference. The Colonial Inn, I'm sure when they rent to somebody, doesn't do a background check when they rent to their people. And that's right in the middle of weekly.
Yeah, I have 2 kids, one that goes to high school, one goes to middle school. I'm not sure if you did that.
There wouldn't be anybody left in.
Okay, sounds like we've reached consensus on that. The only other thing floating around out there as an embellishment or enhancement to the short-term rental is the concept of providing a two-tier kind of a definition. One is a pure money-making business. The other is like casual rentals, just a few weeks a year. Is there any interest in going that deep at this point?
I don't understand.
One resident has suggested that there are really two levels or two classes of short-term rentals. One is a pure 100% money-making, profit-generating
Okay.
one, and the other is just, it's my house, I want to rent it out for 3 or 4 weeks a year. Don't put me through this licensing, don't put me through the rigmarole.
And I remember when we brought this up and I'm not sure where I land on it, but it's where you guys think. But one of the ideas was that with the wait list, the people who are in it for the money making might be less inclined to invest in homes, because if they have to wait for 5 years to make a profit because they're on the wait list, it's going to transition those. That's the theory. They're going to transition the short-term rentals to people who are more invested in the community and live year round and using it more as a supplemental income or part-time, as opposed to the people who are in it for business. Because if you're going to own the house because you want to live here eventually one day, or you want to do some supplemental income, you're going to invest in the property anyway. You're going to spend the money in the property and you're willing to wait on the wait list for it. But if you're in it for a business, you're not thinking 10 years from now all the time. You want to start making your money now. So I don't know. That's one of the reasons where we thought that the wait list could dissuade people who are in it just for the business purposes, because it's less incentive if you have to stay on a wait list for several years.
Have any interest in going that deep at this point?
No. And again, I think that would be just administratively a nightmare as well, so.
Okay, I've seen head shake.
Yeah.
Okay, yep, me either. I get it. But I think we have a pretty tight package here for council with the changes that we talked about tonight. I'm hoping it can pass, and I'm hoping it'll be a good compromise for the community.
Can I clarify the process too? This will go to council, and council may or may not make modifications, but they can make those modifications and they don't have to kick it back to the planning commission.
Right.
So just I want to clarify that. It doesn't guarantee that this will get passed, but doesn't guarantee that it'll even come back to you. It could get passed with modifications, and that's that.
Or anything, yeah, okay. Everybody satisfied, we're giving council enough detail and a good proposal to react to? Okay. Good deal. All right, let's close that out, and then the last thing on the agenda is
Should we
any.
make a
Did I hear a motion to recommend this ordinance? Thank you. I don't know why I keep saying
Thank you,
resolution.
Jeff, for.
Motion for,
We have a
recommend.
motion to recommend the ordinance with the changes we talked about tonight to city council.
I move.
Motion by Vanessa, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Bob. Let's do a roll call vote on this.
Rick Tarczynski,
Yes.
Vanessa Warren,
Yes.
Bob Thoma,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Barry Lustgarten,
Yes.
Nancy Rundell. Motion passes.
All right. That's great. Thanks for your hard work. Thank you, everyone in the public, for helping us think this through. And it's not perfect, but I think it's going to be a pretty
It's a good starting point.
chance of getting us started. So, thanks, everybody online, for your help with that. And the last thing on the agenda is any member comments, other ideas, new ideas? Things you ought to think about.
I do have one or two things. So one thing is an update. On May 22nd at 6 p.m. at the Village Hall Community Center, we are holding a joint meeting between council, the DDA, Chamber of Commerce, and Planning Commission. And you guys will be invited is to talk about economic development in the city of Harbor Springs. So it's open to community. It's not going to be a traditional meeting, but we're going to look at their master plan economic development goals, vision, and see where we're at there and how we can collaborate with other entities and to make progress on those goals. And then the second topic of discussion will be about how the different organizations and boards can collaborate to better serve businesses, residents, and visitors. So that's one thing. Second thing is we've had talk about the.
What time is that again?
That's 6 p.m. on May 22nd. It's a Monday. Childhood, and there'll be food, there'll be pizza. I'm trying to get other businesses to provide sushi and calamari, but there's too much. But So that's Monday, May 22nd, 6 PM at the Childhood Center. And we'll put more notices out there. I just want to tell you in person, that's going on. The second thing is we've talked earlier about the bylaw, potentially editing the bylaws for the 2/3 needed. It needs to have 2/3 approve special land use. And I think we should probably put that on a topic for the next planning commission meeting to change those bylaws, to discuss changing the bylaws. And if there is a proposal to change the bylaws, we would recommend that to council. They have ultimate authority to change the bylaws.
People agree to have that on the agenda for our next regular meeting? Okay, great. Any other member comments? Let's just clarify our schedule then. So this is the end of April for our regular meetings. We are not going to have a special meeting on Thursday, May 4th. Instead, we're going to have a special meeting on Wednesday, May 3rd at 5:30 to hear the guest quarters request. That's the only thing that will be on that.
It's on the 5th.
That's
Third.
Third. So if everybody, all planning commission members could put that in your calendar to be here for Wednesday, May 3rd for that special meeting.
Jeff, would you like me here?
What?
You want me here? All right.
No, it should be a pretty simple meeting.
And I'll try to remember to put that, change the date on the website to Wednesday. It's an automatic thing, so if you guys don't see it in the next week or so on the website to Wednesday, May 3rd, just someone send me a reminder.
Special meeting.
Yeah, because we have our calendar set up as Thursdays, so if I don't go there and change it to that one to Wednesday, just send me a reminder.
All right. We'll look for that. Okay. that's
Yeah,
all.
exactly.
So then our next regular scheduled meeting is
May 18th.
May 18th. And then we're gonna turn around and have the meeting on the 22nd.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Is it a formal meeting?
No, it's gonna be like more of a forum kind of thing. where-
Got it.
Yeah, it's just to share ideas and bounce ideas off.
Kind of like a town hall meeting.
But Bill, you want
Did
us
we have a
there?
June first week meeting, or did we decide?
Oh, we didn't actually decide. I'd say we canceled our June special zoning meeting
Okay.
and let the subcommittee do its work. So,
Yep, the subcommittee is gonna meet. We're gonna come up with a timeline for topics and whatnot. We'll be meeting on May 4th. May the 4th be with us, Star Wars Day. So we'll come up with, I think, some ideas there, and then from that, we will come up with some ideas for special meeting, or it might fall in with a regular business meeting for the planning commission.
we'll report back
Not me, not you.
the work plan.
So just one meeting in June.
Just one at this time.
So far,
So far.
nobody has anything going on in the summer, though. We can have a bunch of special
We just
meetings.
meet every week. Yeah, why not?
Well, please, not every week.
Good. Okay.
I'd be doing
So that should wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for the hard work and the good ideas. And thank you again, folks on the line and people in the room. I really appreciate it. This meeting's adjourned.